Begonias. "Oh, my word!" shrieked Anne Shelton as she watched the next-door neighbour's black Labrador trample her precious begonias. What made matters worse was that the dog had also left a deposit on her neatly manicured lawn. She knocked on the window, but the dog paid no attention to her. She saw the man next door, a Mr. Johnson, who had just moved in 2 weeks before, out in his garden, so she banged on her window. The man looked toward her, and she pointed towards the dog. He peered over the top of the fence and shrugged, shouting, "Dogs will do what dogs do." "Not in my back garden they won't," retorted Anne, who had opened her living room window. "Now please," she commanded with a trembling upper lip as she jerked her thumb in his direction and closed the window. Tom Johnson placed his strong hands on the top of the fence and called on his dog Blackie, which, on hearing the voice, ran back and slithered under the bottom wire of the fence. Anne mimed a thank you to him through the glass, but Tom just looked away, shaking his head. "What a rude man," thought Anne as she drew her curtains and patted her permed red hair. The doorbell rang, and Anne answered, then guided her friend Isabel into the living room. Then heading into the kitchen, Anne told Isabel all about her trouble with the neighbour as she popped on the kettle. "Ah, right," said Isabel. "Tom Johnson had trouble with his neighbours in Brethwick after his wife passed away 1.5 years ago. Things got pretty bad, I heard, and he moved out." "Oh, Isabel, what can I do?" asked Anne with rising concern as she walked into the living room. "Now, Anne, calm down. I didn't say. He was totally to blame." "Is it the dog that's bothering you?" "No, it's just the tip of the iceberg. There's shouts and screams in the night. I don't know what he's up to in there." "Oh dear," said Isabel with a sigh. "I did hear that he rescued the dog from some terrible owners. He's not all bad then, I suppose." A few days later, Anne looked out her living room window onto her garden and felt her blood pressure rise. The begonias she had revived after the last trouble, along with other plants, were either trampled on or completely pulled out of the earth. She noticed Tom Johnson stroll into his back garden, and she opened her window and bellowed, "Mr. Johnson, that dog of yours has been in my garden again," causing him to straighten up and then carry on walking toward his bins. "And if I find another deposit on my lawn, it will come through your letterbox," she shouted with uncharacteristic venom. "Ooh," shouted Tom as he emptied his litter bin. One day, Anne and Isabel were sitting chatting over coffee in a cafe on the high street when Tom Johnson entered and walked past their table and nodded. "They say he does voluntary work at the homeless centre, serves lunches and teas," said Isabel after Tom sat in the cafe's rear. "Oh, I actually find him a bit dishy for his age." "Really? I never noticed," Anne retorted. "His wife died of pancreatic cancer," said Isabel, taking a sip of her cappuccino. "Same as my Dave." Oh, Anne, I didn't mean to. No, it's okay, Isabel, said Anne as she turned and gazed out of the window. He has an American accent, she said after a pause. Yes, they say he was in the services before coming over here and marrying a local woman. Later that day, Anne was browsing the books in the local cancer research charity shop when a deep voice from behind her said, "Would you really do it?" Anne spun around to see Tom Johnson smiling at her from the other side of the pay desk. "Would I do what?" she asked, puzzled. "Put the deposit through my letterbox." "Listen, Mr. Johnson." Tom, I was angry. I don't usually say things like that. I've stopped leaving the dog unsupervised in the back garden. Thank you. I never knew you worked in here. Off and on since my pet died, I felt like I wanted to do something to help since she died of cancer. As did my husband, said Anne with a quivering voice as she ran a finger along the spine of a book on the upper shelf. I would like to help with voluntary work, but I have never had the confidence to volunteer. There's nothing to it. I could register you today, if you like. Oh, I'll think about it, she said, returning to her browsing with a smile. The next morning, Anne's doorbell rang, and answering it, she found Tom Johnson standing at the bottom of the steps. I've come to see if you would like to come and help at the homeless centre on the high street, he said. Oh, Tom, I don't know. You wanted to do something voluntary work, didn't you? Yes, but I'm not properly dressed. We just serve up lunch for homeless people. Come on, you look fine. Okay, I'll get my coat. The dining room of the centre was filling up, and a meaty smell filled the air as Anne and Tom entered. Hey, Tom! Shouted a man with a beard and rotten teeth sitting at a table. Jerry, you're the guy, said Tom with a laugh. What's for dinner today? Asked a young woman in rough clothes. I don't know, Linda, but it smells good. They entered the kitchen and Tom introduced Anne to the other volunteers as he handed her a pinafore. They spent 2 hours serving meals to homeless and to people who had fallen on hard times. On the way home, Anne said, You're different when you're dealing with the people in there. These people are suffering enough without someone like me dealing with them briskly. They walked on in silence for a moment before Tom asked, Would you like to go for a coffee? I think I deserve one after all that serving, said Anne with a laugh. They strolled into a cafe and Tom ordered 2 coffees and 2 muffins. So how did you end up next to me then, Tom? Anne asked after they were seated. It's no secret. I went off the rails a bit when Pat died, Tom said as he sipped his coffee. I was angry at the world, I guess, and I'm afraid the neighbours got in the way. I felt like that when Dave passed away. Anyway, things went from bad to worse, and I had to move. I'm sorry for the shouts at night. I stopped taking my pills for a while, and the dreams returned. Anne put her hand on his. What's the matter with you, Tom? Tom looked into her eyes. I shouldn't be talking about this, but I need to tell you. I can't go running from place to place. You see, when I was a kid in America, I was experimented on with mind control and drugs by the CIA. Oh, you poor man, said Anne as a serious look fell over her features. They strapped me into a chair one time and attached electrodes. I swear to you, Anne, they transported me across the galaxy and I walked on a planet like Earth, but with no people. Tom, I don't know what to say. I still get flashbacks from these times and the campaigns I was on with the army. And I was one of the lucky ones. I survived. The pills I take stop the flashbacks. Tom paused for a moment and stared out of the window. Then he looked at Anne. You have nothing to fear. I just need to stop running. I've restarted the pills, and I'll keep my dog out of your begonias. They both laughed and drank their coffee. Tom eventually convinced Anne to serve behind the cancer research shop counter, and the two became inseparable. Tom would walk Anne to and from the shop and the homeless center. They would go out for coffee on rare days off. One day, Anne was taking Tom's dog for a walk when she heard a familiar voice from across the street. Someone's changed their tune. Anne turned to see Isabel crossing the road toward her, saying, What's happened here? Isabel, oh, let's just say, I've had a change of heart. I know. I heard you and old Grumpy are an item. What's next? An engagement? Well, you never know. So how are you getting on, lady? With Tom? Oh, great. I'm just not sure. Anne? Not sure about what? Not sure if he's quite being honest with me about things from his past. Oh, we all have our skeletons in the cupboard. As long as you're both now happy. Yes, you're right. I wish I could find a man like that, said Isabel with a sigh. Well, get some begonias.